Taoiseach Varadkar and British Prime Minister Theresa May have held a 40-minute meeting in Salzburg, ahead of an informal summit of the 27 EU leaders. Following the meeting, Mr Varadkar told reporters that any agreement on the backstop would be between the UK and the European Union, and not between Ireland and the UK. Entering the summit venue, Mr Varadkar said, "Prime Minister May and I have conversations about this all the time, but this is a negotiation between the European Union and the United Kingdom. Ireland is staying at the heart of Europe, we're staying in the single market and the euro, and we help defend those great projects that have brought enormous prosperity across the continent of Europe. This ultimately is going to be a new treaty, a new negotiation between the EU and UK." Asked if Brexit would necessitate either a border on the island of Ireland or on the Irish Sea, Mr Varadkar said there was already a political and a currency border. "What we want to avoid is any new barriers to the movement of goods, any new barriers to trade, any new barriers to the movement of people. Just think of all the people who cross the border every day, to work or study. Think of all the businesses who trade across the border. That's what we're trying to engineer, a new relationship, so that at least when it comes to those matters it is very much like the one we have now, but that's difficult to do." French President Emmanuel Macron has said it was unlikely there would be a break though on the Irish backstop during today's informal summit of EU leaders in Salzburg, but he insisted that the withdrawal agreement had to contain an Irish backstop. Speaking as he arrived at the summit alongside Mr Varadkar, President Macron said, "We listened yesterday to Theresa May. We all know the proposal made in checkers. We will have a discussion with Mr Barnier. We have to remain united and consistent with what we want. I think Theresa May made some proposals. We have progress. But for sure what we need is a withdrawal agreement with the backstop for our Irish friends, and for the integrity of the whole single market." The Taoiseach said the UK had yet to put forward written proposals on the Irish protocol which would contain the backstop, but he said the British Prime Minister was working hard on the issue and he described her as very sincere. He told Norwegian television, "The EU is very united around our view that we need to protect the integrity of the single market, and any agreement on the withdrawal of the UK from the EU, which we can achieve in the next couple of months, must involve an Irish protocol, a guarantee that a hard border doesn't emerge in Ireland. I don't think we've made much progress since March. The EU has tabled its proposals which we find workable and legal. The UK has yet to table in writing alternative proposals, but PM May is working hard on that. I think she is very sincere and we'll see what they produce." Speaking to reporters at the entrance of the summit, President Macron said the backstop had been accepted by the UK in March and it was also endorsed by 27 EU leaders. "So we have to find collectively, and we need, a UK proposal preserving this backstop in the framework of the withdrawal agreement." Last night at a dinner with EU leaders, Mrs May rejected the European Commission's latest proposals on minimising checks along the Irish Sea in the event of the backstop taking effect. However, President of the European Council Donald Tusk has said the British proposals on avoiding a hard border in Ireland had to be reworked. The differences over the Irish backstop are now coming into starker relief. The Irish government and the European Commission are now focusing all their efforts on what is called de-dramatising the backstop. As reported by RT News yesterday, the EU's chief negotiator Michel Barnier will suggest that of the 4 categories of checks and controls that would normally apply between the EU and a third country, only live animals and agri-food checks would need to take place at British ports on goods going to Northern Ireland. The remaining checks, including customs, could be done away from the ports using technology and pre-clearance. Last night, however, Mrs May rejected these proposals, telling EU leaders they were simply not credible and that they would still lead to a customs border down the Irish Sea. London wants any backstop to be UK-wide as far as customs is concerned, but the EU has so far ruled that out as they see it, as a shortcut to a long-term trading arrangement. It is understood Mrs May could show flexibility on regulatory checks, as those already take place for live animals. But for the moment London appears to be digging in its heels. Last night the Taoiseach suggested that London would have to move, as its proposals on avoiding a backstop were still not acceptable to the EU. Read more. Brexpos to help businesses get Brexit ready. Taoiseach, no progress in Brexit negotiations on Irish backstop. Theresa May rules out any delays to Brexit. More Brexit stories. Meanwhile, the UK's Cabinet Office Minister David Lidington has said he believes the UK and the EU can get to an agreement on the backstop and on the future partnership despite the current difficulties. Speaking on RTÉ's Morning Ireland, Mr Lidington said the UK is trying to be creative and constructive in its approach but could not have a customs barrier between one part of the UK and another. He said the backstop is the key outstanding element needing to be resolved. He said that a lot of important technical and legal agreements are bound up in any agreed backstop, and this is the subject of current negotiations. However, he said any legal text must reflect all aspects of the joint report of last December. Mr Lidington said that the problem with the Barnier proposal is that it suggested Northern Ireland as a separate customs area to the UK. This could not happen, he added. He said the UK has put forward an alternative customs proposal which he thinks will work. Elsewhere, former Taoiseach Bertie Ahern has said it is essential Ireland keeps the coalition of EU member states behind it and not allow the British to push and shove into a future relationship without nailing down the arrangements on the border issue. Mr Ahern told RTÉ's Today with Sean O'Rourke that it would be a disaster to allow the UK move to the future relationship and say is a withdrawal agreement until we have absolute agreement on what happens on the 1st of January 2021. Mr Ahern said that Ireland may need to make further concessions along the way, adding it is not unreasonable that at the point of delivery, for example on the factory floor, that there are proper regulatory checks. He said as far as possible Ireland wants a seamless, frictionless border where Northern Ireland is still in the customs union with no obstacles to trade or people moving. Mr Ahern said he believed the UK wanted to remain in the single market, although that is not its stated position. He said that the UK may also need to make further concessions, but surmised that Theresa May was constrained from changing her position by the upcoming Tory party conference.